Regional recognition came from building experts and government surveyors who documented the thermal mass heating phenomenon during routine frontier development assessments. Federal territorial reports noted improved cold weather survival rates in communities that had adopted expanded hearth construction. County records showed reduced firewood consumption averages in areas where thermal mass techniques had gained acceptance. By 1890, visitors to the Boone Fork Valley could easily distinguish between older cabins, built according to conventional frontier standards, and newer construction incorporating thermal mass heating principles. The oversized hearths, extending deep into cabin interiors, served as a silent testament to one man's practical wisdom and the community's willingness to abandon inadequate methods in favor of superior survival techniques. William Hodges had proven that understanding natural heat storage was far more valuable than simply following accepted building practices, creating a legacy that transformed frontier heating throughout the Appalachian region for generations to come. Boone Fork Valley, North Carolina, October 1877. While everyone else was scrambling to get their cabins finished before winter hit, William Hodges was still hard at work, lugging flat stones up the mountainside. This was week 7 of his build. His neighbors thought he was being wasteful. They even called him a fool. He was building a hearth that stretched a full 6 feet into his cabin, a depth 3 times greater than what was standard on the frontier. This massive stone platform took up a quarter of his cabin's 16 by 20 foot floor space, needing 1,800 pounds of carefully chosen stones. Samuel McKenna shook his head, saying the hearth was bigger than his whole sleeping area. Dutch Heinrich, the local mason who'd built 40 fireplaces in those mountains, declared that 2 feet was plenty for any family. James Wilson, the settlement leader, predicted that when February rolled around, Hodges would wish he had more living space and less stone floor. Then January 15th arrived, bringing with it Arctic air that dropped temperatures to 18 degrees below zero, the coldest anyone could remember. 6 straight days below zero put every heating system in the valley to the test. The standard cabins couldn't handle it. Families huddled together in single rooms, giving up on the rest of their homes. Water froze solid inside cabins, even with fires burning constantly. But Hodges's family, they slept comfortably on that massive stone hearth. The heated platform radiated warmth throughout the night, while their neighbors burned through their entire monthly supply of firewood in just 4 days. What did this mountain man from Tennessee know about storing and releasing heat that everyone else was missing? If you like stories of practical wisdom that have stood the test of time, be sure to subscribe. We've got more documented accounts that are worth remembering. Leave a comment with your city and state. We love seeing where these documentaries are reaching. The autumn of 1877 brought a curious sight to the Boone Fork Valley in western North Carolina. While the established settlers, folks like Samuel McKinney and Dutch Heinrich, watched their neighbors throw up standard frontier cabins in 3 or 4 weeks, a newcomer from eastern Tennessee was still toiling away on his construction in his 7th week and no roof in sight. William Hodges, 34 years old, and carrying the quiet determination of a man who had survived the Great Smoky Mountains, kept hauling those flat sandstone slabs up the mountainside long after more sensible men had moved on to chinking logs and laying floor planks. The source of the community's bewilderment centered on Hodges's fireplace hearth. It had already taken 18 days to build, and it looked like there was no end in sight. While conventional frontier wisdom called for hearths that extended 18 to 24 inches into cabin interiors, a size that required 4 to 6 days of stonework and roughly 400 to 600 pounds of material, Hodges was methodically laying a platform that stretched a full 6 feet deep into his 16 by 20 foot cabin. The math was pretty stark. His hearth would take up 120 square feet of interior space, a full 25% of his total floor area. Samuel McKinney, whose own cabin followed the standard 2-foot depth that had served Virginia settlers for generations, found himself walking over to observe Hodges's progress more and more often. "That man's building a hearth bigger than my whole sleeping area," he told his wife Martha one evening, shaking his head as he watched Hodges carefully fitting another course of stones. "We could sure use that cabin space if you ask me." The criticism carried weight in a community where every square foot of interior space meant the difference between cramped discomfort and adequate living conditions through the long mountain winter. Dutch Heinrich, the settlement's master mason, who had immigrated from Germany 23 years earlier, brought some professional authority to the growing skepticism. Heinrich's credentials were unquestionable. He'd built over 40 fireplaces throughout the western North Carolina mountains, each one following European-trained principles adapted to frontier conditions. His standard design called for hearths extending exactly 24 inches into cabin interiors, a measurement he had refined over decades of experience balancing heating efficiency with material conservation. "I've built 40 fireplaces in these mountains," Heinrich declared to anyone within earshot. 2 feet is plenty for any family. Hodges is either a fool or he's got more money than sense. The mathematical burden of Hodges's design became increasingly apparent as October progressed. While Heinrich's standard hearths required around 500 pounds of stone, a manageable load for most settlers, Hodges's massive platform demanded 1,800 pounds of carefully selected flat stones. Each stone required individual evaluation for its thermal properties, its structural integrity, and how well it would fit with the others. The additional 1,300 pounds of material represented 3 to 4 weeks of extra labor, time that other settlers used to complete roofing, chinking, and interior finishing work. Settlement leader James Wilson, a North Carolina native whose Civil War logistics experience had taught him the value of efficient resource allocation, watched Hodges's project with growing concern. Wilson had founded the Boone Fork settlement back in 1874 by applying military principles to frontier organization, establish shelter quickly, conserve materials, and follow proven methods. Hodges's approach violated every principle of practical frontier construction. Come February, Wilson predicted to the assembled men at the settlement's informal evening gatherings, he'll wish he had more living space and less stone floor. The criticism intensified as neighboring families moved into completed cabins while Hodges continued his meticulous stonework. McKenney's cabin, built according to standard specifications, featured a comfortable hearth extending 20 inches into the interior, surrounded by ample living space for his family of 4. Heinrich's own dwelling showcased professional masonry work, a perfectly proportioned fireplace that heated efficiently without sacrificing interior room. Wilson's cabin demonstrated military precision in its construction timeline, completed in exactly 3 weeks with materials calculated to avoid waste. Yet Hodges persisted with a quiet determination that puzzled his neighbors. When questioned about his methods, he offered only brief explanations that revealed knowledge sources unfamiliar to most frontier builders. "Stone holds heat long after wood stops burning," he told McKenney during one of their conversations. "A big hearth is like a bank. You deposit heat all evening, withdraw it all night." The analogy seemed reasonable in theory, but the practical reality of sacrificing 25% of cabin interior space for unproven heating benefits struck most settlers as an impractical experiment they couldn't afford. The technical specifications of Hodges's project became community conversation throughout October. His hearth platform measured exactly 6 feet deep by 8 feet wide, requiring stones fitted with precision to create a level sleeping surface. Unlike conventional hearths built primarily for functional heating, Hodges was constructing what appeared to be an oversized stone bed positioned directly in front of his fireplace opening. The 8-inch thickness of the platform demanded flat sandstone slabs selected for their ability to store and release heat gradually, materials that required extensive searching in local quarries and creek beds. As November approached and the first frost warnings appeared in the morning valleys, the contrast between Hodges's unfinished cabin and his neighbors' completed dwellings became increasingly stark. McKenna had already begun seasoning firewood and testing his heating system during cold snaps. Heinrich was fine-tuning his chimney draft and checking mortar joints for winter readiness. Wilson had completed all winterization tasks and was helping newer settlers prepare their cabins for the coming cold. Hodges, meanwhile, continued laying stones with a methodical precision that ignored community pressure and approaching weather. His 1,800 pounds of carefully selected sandstone represented not just weeks of extra labor, but a fundamental disagreement with accepted frontier building practices. The massive thermal mass he was creating would either vindicate his unconventional approach or prove his neighbors correct about the folly of sacrificing precious interior space for unproven heating theories learned in the Tennessee mountains of his youth. By early November 1877, Hodges had completed his thermal mass hearth system, and the finished structure defied every convention of frontier fireplace construction. The primary firebox maintained standard dimensions, 3 feet wide and 4 feet high, but the hearth platform extending from it measured 6 feet deep, 8 feet wide, and 8 inches thick. The 1,800 pounds of carefully fitted flat stones created a smooth, level surface that served as both a heat storage system and a sleeping platform positioned to capture maximum radiant energy from the fireplace opening. The scientific principles underlying Hodges's design remained invisible to his neighbors, who saw only an oversized stone floor consuming valuable cabin space. Stone absorbs heat at approximately 0.2 of a British thermal unit per pound per degree Fahrenheit, meaning Hodges's 1,800-pound hearth could theoretically store over 10,000 BTUs when heated from 50 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. This stored energy represented enough heat to warm his cabin for 6 to 8 hours without additional fuel, a thermal battery that conventional frontier hearths could never match. The first demonstration of the system's capabilities came during a November cold snap when temperatures dropped to 25 degrees Fahrenheit. Hodges built an intense fire beginning at 4 in the afternoon, feeding oak and hickory logs steadily until 10 in the evening. The flames heated the stone platform surface to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to warm hands pressed against the surface, but comfortable enough for direct contact. At precisely 10 o'clock, Hodges extinguished the fire completely, swept the hearth clean, and laid canvas and wool bedding directly on the heated stones. Samuel McKinney, observing through his cabin window, watched in disbelief as the Hodges family prepared their sleeping arrangements on what appeared to be a stone floor. McKinney's own heating strategy followed conventional frontier wisdom, banking coals to maintain small fires throughout the night, a method that consumed 4 to 5 cords of firewood per winter and provided 3 to 4 hours of residual heat maximum. His family slept in the warmest corner of their cabin, often waking to frozen water buckets and interior temperatures barely above freezing. The morning after Hodges's first full system demonstration revealed the dramatic effectiveness of thermal mass heating. While McKinney's cabin registered 38 degrees Fahrenheit at dawn, despite his overnight banking efforts, the Hodges cabin maintained an interior temperature of 57 degrees Fahrenheit. The stone hearth continued radiating stored heat 8 hours after the fire had died, creating a warm zone that extended throughout the 16 by 20-foot interior space. Dutch Hinrich, whose professional reputation rested on proven fireplace construction methods, found himself questioning decades of building experience. Hinrich's standard approach involved maintaining fires through the night using carefully banked coals, a technique that required constant attention and substantial fuel consumption. His own cabin, built according to German masonry principles adapted for frontier conditions, achieved reasonable heating efficiency, but demanded continuous fire management to prevent dangerous overnight temperature drops. The technical advantages of Hodges's system became measurable through daily observation. Where conventional frontier heating required 4 to 5 hours of evening fire building followed by overnight fuel management, Hodges burned intense fires for exactly 3 to 4 hours and then slept soundly on his heated stone platform. The elimination of overnight fires removed carbon monoxide risks, reduced fuel consumption, and provided consistent radiant heat that conventional heating could never match. James Wilson, whose military logistics training emphasized practical resource management, began calculating the economic implications of Hodges's method. Wilson's own cabin heating costs averaged 4 cords of firewood per winter, requiring substantial labor for cutting, splitting, and hauling. Hodges's projected fuel consumption of 2.5 cords represented a 40% reduction that translated to significant savings in time and physical effort. Resources, Wilson understood, were precious commodities in frontier survival. The comfort differential between heating systems became apparent to anyone visiting the respective cabins during cold November evenings. Standard frontier cabins featured temperature zones ranging from uncomfortably hot near the fireplace to dangerously cold in distant corners, creating areas where water froze despite continuous fires. Hodges's thermal mass system distributed heat evenly throughout the interior space, maintaining consistent temperatures that eliminated the hot and cold zones plaguing conventional construction. By late November, curiosity began replacing outright skepticism as neighbors observed the practical results of thermal mass heating. McKenney's wife, Martha, noted that she could see steam rising from the Hodges cabin windows throughout the morning hours, indicating interior warmth that persisted long after their own fires required rebuilding. Hinrich found himself asking technical questions about stone selection criteria, mortar composition for thermal expansion, and fire-building techniques optimized for maximum heat transfer. The knowledge sources behind Hodges's innovation gradually emerged through conversations with interested neighbors. His father, Thomas Hodges, had spent 30 years in the Tennessee mountains experimenting with Cherokee thermal cooking stone techniques observed during trade relationships with Native American communities. German immigrants from Pennsylvania had shared masonry stove principles during their westward migration through the Great Smoky Mountains. William had synthesized these traditional knowledge sources with practical experience gained during harsh Appalachian winters that tested conventional heating methods to their limits. The system refinements Hodges developed through November demonstrated his understanding of thermal dynamics beyond simple heat storage. Fire timing proved critical. Beginning at 4 in the afternoon allowed maximum heat accumulation before 10 o'clock sleeping time. Wood selection favored hardwoods like oak and hickory that burned at high temperatures for sustained periods. Stone arrangement required careful positioning to ensure even heat distribution across the platform surface. Bedding adaptation involved canvas and wool layers that provided comfort while allowing heat transfer from stones to sleeping bodies. Core skeptics maintain their positions despite mounting evidence of the system's effectiveness. "It's been a mild winter so far," McKenna insisted to anyone willing to listen. "Wait until real cold hits." Hinrich acknowledged the apparent success, but questioned whether the complex system would prove reliable during extended, severe weather. Wilson wondered if the method would scale beyond a single family's needs or prove adaptable to different cabin sizes and orientations. Yet the measurable results spoke with a mathematical precision that skepticism could not dismiss. By December 1st, Hodges's firewood consumption registered 50% below the settlement average. His family reported the warmest nights of their frontier experience. They suffered none of the respiratory issues common with smoky overnight fires that plagued their neighbors. Most significantly, the community was beginning to recognize that Hodges's wasteful use of cabin space might represent practical wisdom rather than foolish experimentation. December 1877 provided the first sustained testing period for competing heating systems throughout the Boone Fork settlement. Early winter temperatures consistently dropped below freezing, creating conditions that revealed the stark differences between conventional frontier heating and Hodges's thermal mass approach. Temperature logs that Hodges began maintaining in a leather-bound journal showed interior readings that defied his neighbors' expectations and challenged their assumptions about adequate winter heating. Standard cabin interior temperatures throughout the settlement averaged 35 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit by morning. Despite continuous fire management efforts, Samuel McKinn's cabin, representative of conventional construction, required constant attention to maintain even these marginal comfort levels. His family burned 2 to 3 cords of firewood monthly, a consumption rate that demanded daily cutting and hauling, even during the harshest weather. Martha McKenna often woke to find water frozen solid in their cabin's wash basin. Despite Samuel's careful coal banking techniques learned from his Virginia mountain upbringing, the Hodges cabin consistently registered 55 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit by morning. Temperatures that allowed normal daily activities without the layered clothing and restricted movement that characterized winter life for their neighbors. William's firewood consumption averaged 1.5 cords monthly, representing a dramatic reduction that freed substantial time and energy for other essential frontier tasks. The family's evening routine had evolved into a precise thermal management system that maximized heat storage while minimizing fuel requirements. Dutch Heinrich, whose professional mason training had convinced him that adequate heating required a compromise between comfort and fuel efficiency, found himself reconsidering fundamental principles of fireplace construction. Heinrich's own cabin achieved reasonable heating through methods that balanced German masonry traditions with frontier material constraints. His family maintained interior temperatures in the low 40s through careful fire management, but the constant attention required for overnight heating left him questioning whether there might be superior approaches he had never considered. The growing interest among neighbors led to informal technical discussions that revealed the depth of traditional knowledge underlying Hodges's innovations. William freely shared information about his Cherokee-inspired stone heating techniques, explaining how Native American communities had used thermal cooking stones to store and release heat for food preparation and shelter warming. These methods, observed during his childhood in eastern Tennessee, demonstrated principles of heat storage that European frontier traditions had largely ignored. German immigrants' masonry stove principles provided another crucial knowledge source that Hodges had adapted to frontier conditions. Pennsylvania settlers moving westward through the Great Smoky Mountains had shared techniques for constructing thermal mass heating systems designed for sustained heat output rather than immediate warming. These methods required larger initial investments in materials and construction time, but delivered superior long-term efficiency and comfort. The third knowledge source came directly from William's father, Thomas Hodges, whose 30 years of experimentation in the Tennessee mountains had systematically tested various heat storage approaches during particularly harsh winters of the 1840s and 1850s. Thomas had documented methods for heating stone beds that provided all-night warmth without fire maintenance, techniques that William had learned through hands-on demonstration rather than theoretical explanation. Several neighbors began asking increasingly detailed technical questions that indicated serious consideration of adopting similar systems. McKenna inquired about stone selection criteria, specifically wanting to know how to identify sandstone with optimal thermal mass properties. Heinrich asked about mortar composition that could withstand the thermal expansion cycles created by repeated heating and cooling of massive stone platforms. Wilson questioned optimal fire-building techniques that would maximize heat transfer efficiency while minimizing fuel consumption. Safety considerations emerged as a primary concern among potential adopters. The concept of sleeping directly on heated stones raised questions about burn risks and temperature regulation that conventional frontier heating had never required addressing. Hodges demonstrated his safety protocols, showing how canvas and wool bedding layers provided comfortable insulation while allowing beneficial heat transfer. Surface temperatures of 85 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit proved warm enough for effective heating but cool enough for safe direct contact through appropriate bedding materials. The doubters maintained their skepticism with arguments that winter's true test had not yet arrived. All that stone will just draw heat away from the living space, McKenna insisted, despite evidence suggesting exactly the opposite effect. One good blizzard, and we'll see who's built for survival, echoed Heinrich, whose professional reputation required defending conventional methods until overwhelming proof demanded reconsideration. Wilson worried that the complex system might fail during extreme conditions, when reliable heating became a matter of life and death rather than mere comfort. Through December, Hodges continued refining his operational techniques based on daily temperature monitoring and fuel consumption tracking. Fire timing proved critical. Beginning at 4 in the afternoon and maintaining intense flames until 6 o'clock created optimal stone heating without excessive fuel consumption. Wood selection favored oak and hickory for their high-temperature burning characteristics and sustained heat output. Stone arrangement required periodic adjustment to ensure even heat distribution across the platform surface, preventing hot spots that could create uncomfortable sleeping conditions. Bedding adaptation evolved through trial and error as the family learned to balance comfort with heat transfer efficiency. Canvas provided a durable base material that withstood direct stone contact while allowing heat conduction. Wool layers offered insulation that could be adjusted based on stone temperature and ambient air conditions. The combination created a sleeping system that captured maximum benefit from stored thermal energy while maintaining comfort throughout the night. The measurable results by year's end painted a compelling picture of thermal mass heating superiority. Hodges's family firewood consumption registered 50% below the settlement average, translating to significant savings in labor and material costs. Sleeping comfort exceeded anything the family had experienced during previous frontier winters. Health benefits included the elimination of respiratory issues commonly associated with smoky overnight fires that other families endured. Most importantly, community confidence in the method grew as neighbors observed consistent performance through December's varied weather conditions. James Wilson, whose military logistics experience had taught him to evaluate systems based on measurable outcomes rather than theoretical arguments, began documenting comparative data that would influence his own construction decisions. The economic advantages of reduced firewood requirements, combined with superior comfort levels and eliminated fire management demands, suggested practical benefits that transcended initial skepticism about unconventional building approaches. January 15, 1878, brought a massive Arctic front that would test every heating system in the Boone Fork settlement beyond its design limits. The mercury plummeted to 18 degrees below zero, the coldest temperature in local memory, and remained there for 6 consecutive days. Sustained sub-zero conditions created a survival crisis that separated theoretical heating adequacy from practical life-and-death performance. Samuel McKinney burned through his entire monthly firewood allocation in 4 days, desperately feeding his fireplace around the clock in a futile attempt to maintain survivable interior temperatures. His cabin, built according to standard Virginia mountain specifications, could not retain heat against the relentless cold that penetrated chinking, froze mortar joints, and turned glass windows into sheets of ice. Martha McKinney moved the family into their single warmest room, abandoning the rest of their cabin to temperatures that dropped below zero despite continuous fires. Dutch Hinrich's family crowded into their kitchen area, the only space in their cabin where the combined fireplace and cooking stove heat could maintain temperatures above freezing. Heinrich's professional masonry work, which had served 40 families adequately through normal winters, proved insufficient against the Arctic assault. Water froze solid inside his cabin within 3 feet of the fireplace, and ice formed on interior walls despite his desperate efforts to maintain heating fires that consumed wood faster than he could split and carry it. James Wilson faced the most serious crisis of his leadership tenure as settlement founder. 3 families abandoned their cabins temporarily, moving in with neighbors whose heating systems offered marginally better survival prospects. Firewood supplies throughout the community reached critically low levels as desperate residents burned furniture, fence posts, and stored lumber in attempts to generate adequate heat. Several cases of frostbite appeared among children and elderly residents, while cold-related respiratory illnesses struck families forced to breathe smoke-filled air from overworked fireplaces, burning green wood, and inappropriate materials. The Hodges cabin stood as a remarkable contrast to the settlement's suffering. Interior temperatures maintained 45 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit with William's normal fire schedule, requiring only a 25% increase in firewood consumption above his December usage. The family continued their established routine of heating the stone platform from 4 to 6 in the evening, then sleeping comfortably on the thermal mass hearth throughout the night. No frozen pipes or water supplies appeared inside their cabin, and normal daily activities proceeded without the extreme measures consuming their neighbors' lives. The dramatic visual contrast became undeniable by January 20th. Steam rose consistently from Hodges's cabin windows, while neighboring structures showed no exterior signs of interior warmth. Hodges's children played comfortably inside their cabin, while other families' children huddled together in multiple layers, unable to move freely in their frigid interiors. The sounds emerging from respective cabins told the story: normal conversation and activity from the Hodges dwelling, urgent discussions about fuel conservation, and survival strategies from everywhere else. Samuel McKinney's wife, Martha, watching through their single unfrozen window, observed the Hodges family's evening routine with growing desperation. While her own family prepared for another night of survival heating that would consume their dwindling firewood reserves, she could see William calmly extinguishing his fire at 6 o'clock and the family settling onto their heated stone platform for comfortable sleep. The contradiction between their situations had moved beyond mere comfort differences to become a matter of survival versus suffering. By January 22nd, The crisis had deepened into a genuine community emergency. 3 families could know. Neighbors found themselves unable to adequately heat their homes, leading many to seek temporary refuge with others, resulting in overcrowded conditions that stretched everyone's resources thin. Dutch Heinrich, facing the limits of his expertise, privately conceded that conventional fireplace designs were no match for the prolonged sub-zero temperatures. James Wilson worried that some families might not survive if the bitter cold continued much longer. The tide began to turn on January 24th, when Hodges extended an invitation for a community gathering in his cabin. Stepping inside, neighbors were greeted by conditions that were a world apart from their recent experiences. A stark contrast was immediately apparent. A comfortable 52 degrees Fahrenheit in Hodges's cabin compared to the frigid 10 to 20 degrees they were enduring in their own homes. Children played contentedly on the warm hearthstone, while parents engaged in conversation without the heavy layers of clothing that had become essential for survival everywhere else. The undeniable superiority of thermal mass was on full display, a demonstration that couldn't be ignored. William seized the moment to offer technical explanations, revealing the physics that underpinned his system's success. The thermal mass effect of 1,800 pounds of stone, absorbing and gradually releasing heat, created consistent indoor temperatures that conventional heating methods simply couldn't replicate. The heated stone surface, spanning 48 square feet, radiated warmth continuously, providing a thermal output equivalent to a small fire burning steadily through the night. This warm stone platform also served as an insulation barrier, preventing heat loss through the cabin floor, a common problem in standard construction. William's efficiency calculations clearly illustrated why his system excelled where others had failed. A mere 3 hours of intense burning generated 8 hours of stored heat release, effectively eliminating the fuel waste associated with keeping a fire burning constantly. The stone platform's thermal capacity allowed it to store enough energy during the evening heating to maintain comfortable temperatures until morning, when the cycle would begin anew. This approach prioritized using fuel for maximum heat generation rather than simply maintaining a small fire, resulting in superior results with less resource consumption. Heinrich peppered William with detailed questions about the construction techniques, eager to recommend similar systems to families desperately seeking warmth. McKenna inquired about the feasibility of retrofitting existing cabins with expanded hearths. Recognizing that his own family's survival might hinge on embracing these superior heating methods, Wilson questioned the scalability of the approach, wondering if it could be implemented across the community. Recognizing that the survival of the settlement depended on heating systems capable of withstanding extreme weather, the community meeting in Hodges's warm cabin marked a turning point, a moment when skepticism melted away in the face of practical necessity. Families who had previously dismissed his methods as wasteful experimentation now faced the grim reality that conventional frontier heating could fail catastrophically during severe weather. The man they had once considered foolish for sacrificing living space to build a thermal mass structure had created the only consistently comfortable shelter in the entire settlement. As neighbors returned to their freezing cabins that evening, the stark contrast served as a powerful catalyst for change. The knowledge that superior heating methods existed, proven under the most challenging conditions, transformed the community's attitude from skepticism to an urgent desire to learn the techniques that could mean the difference between surviving the winter and enduring unbearable suffering. By February 1878, the Boone Fork settlement had embarked on a transformation with unprecedented urgency. Samuel McKinney began collecting flat stones during winter thaws, planning a hearth expansion to prevent his family from experiencing another crisis like the January freeze. His wife, Martha, meticulously documented their winter firewood consumption, totaling 4.5 cords, compared to Hodges's mere 2.8 cords. This mathematical evidence convinced McKenna that their Virginia mountain heating methods needed a fundamental overhaul. Dutch Heinrich abandoned his adequate is enough philosophy, a guiding principle throughout his 2 decades of professional masonry work. The master craftsman, who had built over 40 standard fireplaces throughout western North Carolina, began studying Hodges's thermal mass construction with the same meticulous attention he had once reserved for European guild techniques. Hinrich's professional reputation, built on conventional methods, now depended on mastering innovations that a Tennessee settler had developed through a combination of traditional knowledge and practical experience, rather than formal training. James Wilson began gathering stones during February's brief warming spells, recognizing that effective community leadership required embracing superior survival methods before recommending them to others. His experience in military logistics had taught him that successful systems must prove their reliability under extreme conditions. And Hodges's thermal mass hearth had done just that during the January crisis. Wilson's planned hearth expansion would serve as a demonstration of leadership while also providing his own family with heating security that conventional construction couldn't guarantee. 3 new settlers, arriving in late February, specifically sought Hodges's advice before beginning cabin construction. Word of the thermal mass heating success had spread beyond the immediate settlement through winter travelers and correspondence with families considering homesteading in western North Carolina. These newcomers requested detailed consultations about site selection, foundation preparation, and construction scheduling, making sure to accommodate the extended timelines required for building these substantial hearths. The knowledge transfer process that began in March revealed the depth of technical expertise needed for successful thermal mass construction. Hodges conducted stone selection workshops in local quarries, teaching his neighbors how to identify sandstone with optimal thermal properties, dense, flat stones without any fracture lines that could expand and contract during repeated heating cycles, potentially causing them to crack. These strict selection criteria eliminated approximately 60% of the available stones, requiring extensive searching, which explained the extended construction timeline that had initially frustrated his neighbors. Construction technique demonstrations showcased the precision required for proper foundation and mortar work to support the massive 1,800-pound stone platforms. Standard frontier hearth construction used basic clay and sand mortars, which were adequate for smaller thermal loads, but thermal mass systems demanded lime-based mortars capable of withstanding the expansion stresses caused by repeated heating and cooling cycles. Heinrich, drawing upon his European training, developed mortar compositions specifically designed for thermal mass applications to meet these demanding requirements. Fire management instruction proved to be just as crucial as construction techniques. Optimal burning schedules for maximizing heat storage required a deep understanding of wood selection, fire timing, and flame maintenance, all of which differed significantly from conventional frontier heating practices. Oak and hickory, when properly managed, burned at temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, efficiently heating the stones to surface temperatures between 85 and 90 degrees while carefully avoiding dangerous overheating that could crack the stone platforms or create unsafe sleeping conditions. Safety protocol education addressed concerns about burn risks and temperature regulation associated with sleeping on heated stones. Canvas and wool bedding systems required specific layering techniques to balance comfort with efficient heat transfer. Surface temperature monitoring helped prevent overheating that could cause burns, while proper bedding arrangement maximized beneficial heat absorption throughout the sleeping hours. These techniques, learned through Hodges's own trial and error during December and January, eliminated the learning curve that could make thermal mass heating dangerous for inexperienced users. The spring construction boom of 1878 led to unprecedented demand for thermal mass expertise throughout the region. 8 existing cabins underwent hearth expansion projects, which involved partially dismantling existing fireplaces and rebuilding them using thermal mass principles. 4 new cabins incorporated Hodges's hearths from the very beginning, integrating thermal mass requirements into site selection and structural design. The local quarry reported a staggering 300% increase in flat stone demand, requiring expanded operations to serve the numerous construction projects throughout western North Carolina. Dutch Heinrich began specializing in thermal mass hearth construction, adapting his European masonry training to meet the growing demand for heating systems capable of withstanding extreme weather conditions. Heinrich's professional transformation from skeptic to advocate provided credibility that significantly accelerated the community's adoption of thermal mass methods. His standardized construction specifications ensured consistent quality while reducing construction time through systematic approaches that other settlers could easily follow. The measurable winter outcomes from the 1877 to 1878 season provided compelling evidence for the superiority of thermal mass heating. The Hodges family's total firewood consumption of just 2.8 cords compared favorably to the settlement average of 4.5 cords, representing savings of $23 in firewood costs, a substantial sum for frontier families operating on minimal cash incomes. Health comparisons revealed 0 cold-related illnesses in the Hodges household versus an average of 2.3 incidents per family throughout the settlement. Comfort metrics documented by families throughout the community confirmed that thermal mass heating allowed them to maintain their normal daily activities even during the coldest period in local memory. In contrast, conventional heating often forced activity restrictions and survival-focused behaviors that limited productivity and overall quality of life. Economic impact calculations showed that reduced firewood requirements freed up substantial time and energy for other essential frontier tasks, improving overall homestead efficiency and family welfare. By 1880, the spreading reputation of thermal mass heating techniques had reached beyond the immediate Boone Fork settlement. Sleeping hearths were documented in 23 mountain communities throughout western North Carolina, indicating widespread adoption of methods that had originated with one man's willingness to challenge conventional frontier building practices. Technical variations, developed to suit different cabin sizes and orientations, demonstrated the adaptability of thermal mass principles to diverse construction requirements and family needs.